Coming up on Bridge City News, the Alberta Medical Association has a beef with Health Minister Tyler Shandro. We will explain why. A GoFundMe campaign has been set up to support a Redcliffe teenager who suffered serious injuries after falling from a waterfall near Pincher Creek. And we have an update on the We Charity scandal involving Prime Minister Justin Trudeau from political reporter Brian Lilly.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro introduced legislation that would legally require doctors to publicly disclose their billings. The amendment would compel doctors to reveal what they are paid for when it comes to publicly funded health services. Some physicians argue that it does not accurately represent their compensation since it does not take into account their costs for staff, clinics, and equipment. Now, the Alberta Medical Association says they are not happy with Health Minister Tyler Shandro. The group recently voted overwhelmingly against Shandro, with 97% of doctors within the AMA saying that they do not have confidence in Shandro to manage the province's healthcare system in an efficient way. The president of the AMA, Dr. Christine Molnar, says the no confidence vote is not supposed to be a way of getting Shandro fired, but instead they want the government to come back to the table to talk with them.
I'm writing a letter to the Premier and I'm asking him for a meeting. I think that we need to, I'm hoping that we can sit down calmly and discuss the state of affairs and find a way forward together. That's what I'm hoping for. He is the leader in our province. We are asking him for help. I will be asking him for a meeting.
Bridge City News reached out to the office of Health Minister Tyler Shandro, but has yet to hear back. The Alberta government wrapped up a marathon session which saw 34 bills being passed. The UCP says since they formed government last year, 255 of the 375 promises made to Albertans have been kept. Now, some of the bills passed included Bill 8, which protects vulnerable Albertans at risk of being trafficked, strengthens a survivor's ability to escape physically, emotionally, and financially damaging abuse. Also, Bill 15, which expands the range of options available for parents and students to choose schooling that best works for them, from private to homeschooling to traditional Catholic or public schools. And Bill 13, which further refines the authority granted to local governments to manage emergency public health measures during a pandemic. The Alberta government says there were 133 new cases of COVID-19 today, bringing the provincial total to 1,430. Fortunately, close to 9,000 Albertans have also recovered from the virus. Now, here's a breakdown of the current active cases and zones across the province. In the South Zone, including Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, there are currently 142 active cases. In the Calgary Zone, 713. In the Edmonton Zone, 278. In the Central Zone, which includes Red Deer, there are 175 active cases, and in the North Zone, there are 114. The province says 190 people have died from the novel coronavirus. Across Canada, there have been 8,915 deaths. Edmonton City Council voted 10-3 today to make wearing masks mandatory in all Edmonton indoor public spaces beginning August 1st. Our provincial capital is joining Calgary in bringing forth the temporary bylaw. The Edmonton bylaw includes indoor spaces that are both public and privately owned. Edmonton Mayor Don Iveson says he hopes other municipalities around Edmonton will take similar steps to level the playing field for all businesses, protecting both workers and customers from COVID-19. The City of Lethbridge is also looking at potentially making wearing masks indoors mandatory by August the 10th. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says there are active discussions taking place to potentially pre-order COVID-19 vaccine doses for Canadians. Tam says an independent vaccine task force is advising the government on options for Canada's choice of vaccine, including the possibility of manufacturing a potential pandemic cure right here at home.
Well, I think, as I've just said, there are quite a number of different candidates, and they're all being considered and evaluated. And there are active discussions right now going on with a whole range of manufacturers that have promising candidates, but I can't speak to you as to where those discussions have got to, but I expect that news will come from the vaccine task force as they are ready to provide that, or the ministers responsible. The main objective is getting vaccines to Canadians as fast as possible.
More than 4,500 asymptomatic COVID-19 tests have been administered by physicians in Alberta. A limited number of pharmacies in the province are taking part in the pilot phase of the initiative to test for the coronavirus. The Medicine Shop in Lethbridge is one business that has been testing for COVID-19 locally.
Like we encourage people just to make sure you get your tested regularly, especially when you are in a contact with vulnerable or you will be in a contact with vulnerable. Make sure you get tested regularly because for a young person, okay, the chances of getting a complication is a little bit less. But for people who has a disease, like any chronic disease like diabetes, asthma, or any immunosuppressive condition, certainly it will just get worse from day one. So yeah, we don't want to fool around with this virus.
In April, the province announced its plans to have 20,000 tests done by the end of May. That goal has not yet been reached. A GoFundMe account has been set up for a Redcliffe, Alberta teenager who recently fell from Lundbrick Falls near Pincher Creek. 17-year-old Alexis Streifel and her friend visited the falls, and after seeing others jumping from the top, Alexis wanted to do so as well. Now, she went to jump, thought better of it, tried to turn around, but could not stop and fell over the edge onto the rocks 39 feet below. Onlookers pulled Alexis from the water and paramedics were called. The teen suffered a wide range of injuries, including spinal fractures, a broken femur, shattered hips, knees, a broken pelvis, and foot. She is currently in ICU in a Calgary hospital and may be there for a year. The GoFundMe campaign has so far raised $25,000 of a $30,000 goal to help Alexis and her family. With temperatures in Lethbridge hitting above 30 degrees this week, Alberta Health Services is encouraging you to make sure that you stay safe and out of the heat. As Micah Quinn explains, this is especially true for those who are most vulnerable, including our seniors and children.
With the summer in full swing, sweltering heat is part of the package deal. Alberta Health Services is warning people to look out for signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke.
Because exhaustion is the warning to heat stroke, and so it gives us a chance to prevent heat stroke. So exhaustion is when you start having the symptoms of feeling tired and thirsty and headachy and not feeling well. And so that's usually a signal for you to get into some place cool and drink lots of water and stay away from the heat as much as possible, get into an area that's air conditioned, that kind of thing.
Dr. Ellimer wants the public to know that seniors and children may be extremely susceptible to heat stroke during the summer.
Our most vulnerable population is the very young and very old who don't notice these symptoms and they can't warn us ahead of time. So for those people, I like to tell people to just keep an eye on them, and if they seem different than your usual because they can't tell you their symptoms, to make sure you're giving them water or putting them in an area where they can get cooler.
Construction workers are also highly vulnerable to heat stroke. Dr. Ellimer says workers should take breaks and listen to how they are feeling while they are working in the sun. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
You may have noticed a massive construction project taking place in downtown Lethbridge. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, it's an effort by our city to revamp 3rd Avenue and transform the downtown core.
A $10 million project the city is calling streetscaping is underway. Underground infrastructure that's over 100 years old will be replaced, among other visual elements.
Benches, more trees, there's going to be raised parking out there, wider sidewalks. We are actually going to be reducing a lane of traffic in each direction, so it'll be single lane traffic moving each way with dedicated turning lanes.
The city says it's received positive feedback from business owners, but recognizes not everyone agrees with the project's price tag.
Of course, there are people that are probably not going to support the type of dollars going into this type of project, but at the end of the day, the increase or in the long-term sustainability of the infrastructure is going to support businesses and make downtown vibrant for a number of years.
Construction is expected to run between 6th and 8th Street for the remainder of this year, and the entire project is supposed to be finished by the fall of next year. Downtown BRZ Executive Director Ted Stilson says that this is the biggest downtown infrastructure project the city has seen in 40 years.
The last main one was on Festival Square and in the Pergola and Galt Gardens, so we're really excited about that investment in the downtown core. It ties in really nicely with the new branding campaign.
Businesses all over the country have struggled because of the pandemic. City officials say they are working to ensure that construction doesn't add to the already challenging times.
So we've actually put together some specific branding and signage to try to help encourage people to come down here. So we'll have that up on the sidewalks to kind of help navigate.
There is going to be some inconvenience, but they're staggering where the construction is taking place. So trying to make it as less awkward for everyone as it can be, but in the long run, it's going to work out really well.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
During this COVID-19 pandemic, it's no secret that some people have fallen on hard times, especially with all of the job losses and businesses closing down. As a result, food banks have been ramping up their efforts to collect food items for those who are in need. But what if the family has a pet? The City of Lethbridge helps needy families with fur babies through a pet food bank.
People can come down and get dog food, cat food, or litter. We ask people who are donating that the food is unopened and unused. So we do want to make sure that people know we are still open. We're not open to the public right now because of COVID, but you can call in and pretty much ask what you need, and we can essentially give you that if we have it. And same with donations. We aren't open to the public, but just call in and just let us know. And you can call us at 403-320-4099.
Talk about sticker shock. A Calgary man is urging buyers to do their homework after finding out the truck he purchased from a reputable dealer was stolen. Last December, Skylar Anderson bought a 2014 Dodge Ram pickup truck from Sunridge Automotive for $33,000. He then received a call informing him that the truck was hot and that his vehicle identification number and the sticker was wrong. Sunridge Automotive says what happened is extremely rare and gave him a full refund. Conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre says he expects Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to tell the truth over the aborted deal to have We run a student volunteer program. Poilievre warns Trudeau that he could be summoned again if he does not give detailed answers.
We want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He kept hidden the fact that his family received over $300,000 in speaking fees. And then when that revelation came out, I asked point blank in the House of Commons what other expenses had his family received. And he kept that hidden until yesterday when we got a grudging and even confusing answer from the Kielburger brothers. What else is he hiding in this affair? He should come tomorrow and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, for once.
Political reporter Brian Lilly says what many Canadians also have a problem with is how the Trudeau Liberals kept changing the numbers as to how large the We Charity contract was.
It stated that this was for $500 million. It could go up to $912 million, but it was for $500 million. Now, the other part of the problem here is that we were originally told, okay, it's a $912 million contract, contribution agreement, but don't worry, We's only getting $19.5 million for their administration fee for running the program. Then we found out, oh no, it's $912 million and they'll get $43.5 million. You think, oh, that's worse. No, it's worse. They're still supposed to get, or we're supposed to get, $43.5 million for a $500 million contract.
Mr. Lilly will have the latest of the We Charity scandal and how it's impacting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Finance Minister Bill Morneau coming up after Business News. A long line of marchers made their way from the Halifax waterfront today to the provincial legislature. Around 100 people, including relatives of some of the 22 people killed in a mass shooting last April, thanked supporters for helping to convince Ottawa and the province to hold a full public inquiry.
I'm so pleased that we're here today in celebration rather than in protest. I want to say I'm so proud of the families for their hard work and their perseverance that we've been able to, I shouldn't say we, that they have been able to achieve a full public inquiry into the events of April of 2020. I know that it has been additionally painful and grief-causing for them to have to fight this fight, but knowing that it has had such a positive result surely takes a bit of the pain out of it.
Last week's joint decision to hold a review into the killings was criticized as lacking transparency, accountability, and the legal clout necessary to compel witness testimony. Spurred on by U.S. President Donald Trump's demand to pull troops out of Germany, the U.S. will bring around 6,400 forces home and shift another 5,600 to other countries in Europe.
As we've entered a new era of great power competition, we are now at another one of those inflection points in NATO's history. And I'm confident the alliance will be all the better and stronger for it. The current EUCOM plan will reposition approximately 11,900 military personnel from Germany, from roughly 36,000 down to 24,000, in a manner that will strengthen NATO, enhance the deterrence of Russia, and meet the other principles I set forth. Of the 11,900, nearly 5,600 service members will be repositioned within NATO countries, and approximately 6,400 will return to the United States.
NASA has upped the ante with its newest rover, which is headed to Mars. Set to rocket away this week from Florida, the spacecraft called Perseverance is NASA's brawniest and brainiest Martian rover yet.
We're going to get an up-close and personal view of whether there are organics in the rocks of Mars, and we're going to get an up-close and personal view of the lake sediments at Jezero Crater and the groundwater and hydrothermally altered rocks outside. So we're going to get an amazing view into the first billion and a half years of Mars history.
Now, interesting fact about Mars, it can get down to as low as minus 117 at night. You know, it's been the opposite for our region here. Heat warning from Environment Canada continues, and the hot temperatures will be sticking around for quite some time. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. The heat warning continues for many parts of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, nothing but a clear sky and sunshine for the rest of the week.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of surprising considering all the humidity that's in the air that we're not getting those showers and thunderstorms the way that they are in so many other parts of the country, including Calgary and Edmonton. But you did mention we are continuing to be in a heat warning, and that is issued when high temperatures could cause illnesses such as heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So stay cool, everybody, drink plenty of water, and remember to find some shade when you can. Overnight low tonight, 14 degrees. We're going to see clear skies this evening with a southwesterly wind. Into tomorrow, more sunshine headed our way. 30 degrees is the high with that humidex. It is going to feel hotter though. 15 degrees is the overnight low for tomorrow evening. And as we look into the 5-day forecast, much the same. We are going to be seeing a mix of sun and cloud on Friday with a high of 29, 31 expected for Saturday, 32 for Sunday. Nice sunny weekend there. Sunshine continuing through next Monday with a high of 33, and then next Tuesday a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 28 degrees. So those temperatures are high with that heat warning, and on average we should be seeing temps around 26 degrees. We're much higher, obviously. Our average low for this time of year, 11. The high temperature on this day was back in 2007, and it was 37 degrees. 4 degrees was the low. That was in 1963. The sun rose this morning at 5:58 a.m. and our evening sunset tonight, 9:17 p.m. as we're seeing those days get just a little tiny bit shorter now. Now let's take a look at what's happening tomorrow across the country. Sunshine expected in Victoria, beautiful day there. 27 is their high, 26 in Vancouver, mix of sun and cloud. We should see some sunshine tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 24, mix of sun and cloud in Edmonton with a high of 25. Both of those cities, though, could see showers this evening and risks of thunderstorm. Same for Saskatoon. They are also under a heat warning. 30 degrees is their high tomorrow. Sunshine tonight. Same with Regina. Sunshine, 33 degrees. Those towns could also see some showers this evening. Toronto's high, 28 degrees. They could see a possibility of some showers with some mix of sun and cloud. Possible thunderstorms expected in both Ottawa and Montreal tonight and into tomorrow with a high of 25 for those cities. And as we look into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton also seeing a chance of a thunderstorm, high of 27. Charlottetown and Halifax both also under heat warning advisories. They could also see some thunderstorms developing, particularly in Halifax there. Mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in Charlottetown. They could see some showers. Showers also expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 15 degrees. There you go. That is your forecast. Stay cool, everyone.
Shopify blew past expectations with a second quarter profit of $36 million US. That compares with a loss of almost $29 million a year earlier. The Ottawa-based tech company says new stores created on its platform grew 71% as the coronavirus pandemic accelerated the shift to e-commerce shopping. It says revenues in the quarter nearly doubled to $714 million, while adjusted earnings reached $129 million, or $1.05 per share. That was well ahead of what analysts were expecting of revenue of around $514 million. Enbridge says its second quarter net income slipped 5% from last year to $1.65 billion. The pipeline company says revenue dropped 40% to nearly $8 billion due to lower crude oil prices caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the OPEC price war. That was well below the $12.5 billion that analysts were expecting. Enbridge reaffirmed its cash flow guidance for 2020, saying it anticipates a recovery in demand as COVID-19 restrictions are slowly lifted and mobility returns to North America. Even though General Motors was able to reopen its American factories for the last half of the second quarter, it still lost $806 million in the April to June period. The Detroit automaker had to close its plants from March to May due to COVID-19, and production did not resume fast enough to stem the losses. Like other automakers, GM counts revenue when vehicles are shipped from factories, so it had little money coming in for 7 weeks in April and May. Boeing is reporting a loss of $2.4 billion US for the second quarter. The company says it will slow production and cut more jobs as the airline market gets battered by the COVID-19 outbreak. Boeing says it now expects the airline industry will take longer than originally anticipated to recover from the pandemic. COVID-19 has compounded problems for Boeing that began when its 737 MAX airliner was grounded following 2 crashes that killed 346 people. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 173 points on the day to finish at 16,294. The Dow was up 160 points to 26,539. The S&P 500 was up 40 points to 3258, and the Nasdaq was up 140 points to 10,542. Oil was up 27 cents to 41.31 per barrel. Natural gas was up a nickel to $1.85. Gold was up 13.01 to 1970.93 an ounce, and silver was down 14 cents to 24.26 an ounce. Wheat is at $228 per metric ton, barley's at $235, canola's at $470, and corn is at $228 per metric ton. Those were all spot prices. Live cattle were up $1.05 to $105.50, feeder cattle were up $1.28 to $141.90, and lean hogs were down $1.13 to $53.08. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 74.98 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a GoFundMe account has been set up for a Red Cliff, Alberta teenager who recently fell from Lundbrick Falls near Pincher Creek. More than $25,000 has been raised for 17-year-old Alexis Streifel, who fell from the falls and is currently in ICU at a Calgary hospital. She suffered serious injuries including spinal fractures, shattered hips, knees, a broken pelvis, and foot. The We Charity scandal continues for the Trudeau Liberals. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have an update for us next. Charity scandal continues. Will it be enough to bring down the Trudeau Liberals? To talk more about it is Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilly, joining me now via Skype. Brian, the co-founders of We Charity spoke for 4 hours during the Finance Committee on Tuesday, trying to explain why they did not register to lobby and how they received the contract. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, Craig Kielburger said many times, oh, we were doing Canada a favor. We weren't going to get anything out of this. It's not on us. They tried to explain around the issue of why they didn't register to lobby, despite the fact that their charitable grants and contributions and even contracts from the government have gone up from about $500,000 during the last several years of the Harper government to $5 million in the first 4 years of the Trudeau government. So, that's quite the incredible jump. And despite that, they didn't register to lobby, even as they were pitching the government. They now admit that maybe they misread the rules. They thought that they were following the rules, but maybe they will re-examine this in the future. But there were a lot of tough questions put to them. There'll be more tough questions on Thursday when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, testify. Because, look, from the government's point of view, there's a couple of things going on with this We scandal. From the government's point of view and the whole issue of conflict of interest, that's not on We. That's on the government. There are questions about we can get into that in a moment. But on this issue of conflict of interest, it's up to the public office holder to make sure that they're not in a conflict of interest. And of course, we know that Justin Trudeau's mother received more than $312,000 in speaking fees. From the Kielburgers, we learned about just shy of $168,000 in expenses and travel that was paid for her as well. So we're talking about almost $500,000 just to Margaret Trudeau, never mind the Prime Minister's brother Sasha, or the travel expenses and fees paid to his wife Sophie, which is on a much smaller scale. So that is part of where the Prime Minister gets into the conflict of interest. And there are questions about the trip for Bill Morneau and his family. Well, that's on Bill Morneau. Perhaps we should have been upfront with him that they were giving him a complimentary trip, and quite frankly, that does put them in the position of having to answer, well, were you trying to give an inducement to a politician? So, but most of this is on the government. There are questions about about the charity, how they operate. That's totally separate from the issue of conflict of interest, which is, we've discussed before, now being investigated by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner.
Now, the former chair of We Charities said that she resigned from the board after resignation was demanded by Craig Kielburger. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so Michelle Douglas, who's a Canadian Forces veteran, someone who's been active in the charitable sector for many years. She spent about 14 years on the WE board and the last few as chair of the board. She said that when the layoffs started at WE in March, as the pandemic started to hit, that she formed an ad hoc committee of board members. She and the chair of the American board of WE, along with a couple of others, started calling in. They would do conference calls and get daily updates on the financials, because we was starting to, the executive staff were starting to say, okay, donations are drying up. This is going to put us in a tough financial position. They started laying off staff. At first it was tens, then hundreds. And by the end, well over 400 staff, or almost half of the organization's staff, were let go. Michelle Douglas says that she kept asking for more information on this. She wanted to know, how is the organization doing financially? And as the chair of the board, that's not only your right, that's your duty, because if you are the chair of a charitable organization, you have a fiduciary responsibility. In fact, you can be held liable for the financial state of a charity if you're on the board. She was denied by the executive time and again. She says that in a late March call with Mark Kielburger, she asked for more information. She said she wanted it by the end of the day, if not the next morning, first thing. She says that he hung up and that the next call was from Craig Kielburger demanding her resignation. This is an odd charity in that the founders are able to replace the board almost at will. And that's what they did in March. She raised serious concerns, not about WE's ability to deliver the program. That started after she had already left at the end of March, but rather the governance structure of the organization. And that comes up with how the contract was awarded, not to We Charity, but to a subsidiary, We Charity Foundation, and there's the Wellbeing Foundation and the Me to We Foundation and another charity. And it all gets very confusing and very complex. She said this is a complex structure. It is not a well thought out one, and she had issues with it. Issues that she said she raised, but that were not properly addressed. By the way, she did say that the board asked several times about whether speakers were paid, and for We Day events, she was told no all the time. So she said she was shocked to find out that Margaret Trudeau and Alexandra, or Sasha Trudeau, were both paid to show up at We events.
Now, speaking of big bucks, We Charity was supposed to receive $33 million in funding by July 2nd, a week after the contract was announced, Brian, and it was canceled July 3rd. Is the organization returning those taxpayers' dollars?
Yeah, and by the sounds of it, it has not happened yet. At least that's not what Mark Kielburger was saying during Finance Committee testimony, but said it will be returned. It's a strange contract. I mean, I'd love to get this kind of contract. You know, sometimes you hear about athletes signing a deal and they get a big bonus up front, but a lot of the contract's backloaded, and that favors the team in some ways, but maybe it favors the athlete because, you know, they'll be paid for years to come, even after they've stopped playing. In this case, We is asked to do a service for the government. The contract is announced June 25th. We now found out that we started working on it on May 5th, but the public doesn't find out until June 25th. That's when it's announced, and they were supposed to get $19.5 million by July 1st. Strangely, the contract says on July 2nd, we'll get another $13.5 million. So that puts it up to $33 million. All within a week of the contract being signed and announced. It's all very strange and kind of a front ending. You know, think of it like your mortgage, Hal. You sign a mortgage with the bank, all of their money gets taken out up front. You start paying down on your house years later. It's that sort of setup that seemed very odd. We did say the money will be returned. and that they backed out, they said, because the whole issue had become far too political.
You know, you're right. I remember my principal interest in tax in the first house I ever bought. It was all interest. You know, it's like, how much went to my principal? How much was that? $1,000 for the year? That was it? Oh, well, okay. At least I'm building equity, right?
$1.50 per payment,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
Something like that.
Now, the contract with We was originally supposed to be $912 million, but earlier this week we found out that it was only $500 million, with We receiving, what, 43.5 mil?
Yeah, you know, trying to keep track of this is incredibly difficult because even the government's line on this changes constantly, and we've heard different things from We. And then, they turned around several times and blamed the media for not reporting the facts properly. Well, it was the government that put out the $912 million figure, and it was repeated, and the government did not correct it. Until Monday, they released the contribution agreement. Dare not call it a contract. It was a contribution agreement, Hal, a distinction without a difference to anyone that doesn't work for the civil service in Ottawa. Regardless, it stated that this was for $500 million. It could go up to $912 million, but it was for $500 million. Now, the other part of the problem here is that we were originally told, okay, it's a $912 million contract, contribution agreement, but don't worry, We's only getting $19.5 million for their administration fee for running the program. Then we found out, oh no, it's $912 million and they'll get $43.5 million. You think, oh, that's worse. No, it's worse. They're still supposed to get, or we're supposed to get, $43.5 million for a $500 million contract. So, the numbers change all the time. The stories change all the time. If the public's confused, I don't blame you. I'm covering this day in, day out. I've been eating, breathing, sleeping this for 2 weeks or more now, and I get confused at times.
And the soap opera continues. The saga continues. Brian, Health Canada has approved a drug to treat severe symptoms of COVID-19. This antiviral medication was originally used to help treat Ebola.
Yeah, and forgive me if I get the name wrong. It's not an easy one. Remdesivir, I think is how you say it. So it's being approved for people with exacerbated conditions, with severe conditions. So, a lot of people have talked about that other drug that I have trouble saying, hydroxychloroquine. That's the one that is now mostly associated with Donald Trump, and everyone fights about it based on politics and not their science. That was touted by some as a preventative measure, that if you were in the hospital and deathly ill with it, it may not actually help, or it may lessen symptoms, but overall it was better to deal with early on. This is being touted as if you've got severe pneumonia type symptoms while sick with COVID-19, this can help. It's not a cure. It's not going to be a vaccine, but Health Canada is saying we have enough confidence that this can go on. They are still trying other drugs. They are still testing them. They have even, Health Canada and the Alberta government, I believe, along with some other provinces, have even put money into testing for things like hydroxychloroquine to try and find out how they can use it. They are looking at all options, and if somebody comes forward with something, anything promising, the health officials are looking at it, but trying to do it in a responsible manner so that they don't do more harm than good by giving people drugs that may not actually deal with the symptoms, deal with the problem.
And it appears as though the federal government is looking to pre-order the vaccine even before it's ready. How close are we really?
Well, there's a bunch of different vaccines going on, or vaccine attempts around the world. A Toronto company approached them and said, look, we need to start doing human trials, but if you give us an order, we will be able to manufacture, but we need funding. So that's part of what they're talking about there. It wouldn't be odd for the federal government to come into that sort of contract. I remember for H1N1, they had contracts with, I think, 3 different labs across the country. I think one was in Ontario, one was in Winnipeg, one was in Quebec for producing vaccines for H1N1. In this case, we don't have a workable vaccine yet, but we hope that will change. There was some hope for one that was being tested at Dalhousie University. That's the one that was being done in conjunction with the Chinese government, or more correctly, perhaps the Chinese military. That one seems to have hit the skids a little bit. China is no longer sharing data with Canada. The last I heard on that one, Oxford University is talking about being very close to one, and the Americans are pouring money into a few different possibilities. So Someone will eventually pop and get a vaccine. We will get this. Just to put it in mind, there were a lot of people looking for a cure for diabetes or a treatment, and it was just on this day, last Monday in 1921, that Banting and Best found that. They were one of many teams around the world. We're hoping for the same kind of thing with a vaccine for COVID-19, Hal.
Brian, one of the main frontrunners to succeed Andrew Scheer as leader of the federal Conservatives, Peter MacKay, says if he wins the leadership and becomes the next prime minister, he would entertain thoughts of selling the PM's cottage at Harrington Lake.
Yeah, and that may sound great, but if you ask me, this is going to be one of those things where Peter MacKay, if he wins, and there's a poll out from my friend John Wright at Mauru Blue, saying that he is the favorite, not among Conservative Party members, which is who will decide, but among people who would be open to voting Conservative. Peter MacKay is the favorite by far over Aaron O'Toole. More than 55% of those who said they would consider voting Conservative said they would consider if Peter MacKay were leader versus 25% for O'Toole. But this is one of those problems. I'll sell off the PM's cottage. Well, it may not be that easy to do. It's owned by a bureaucracy that is arm's length from the federal government. It is there for the prime minister to use. It's like saying you'll sell off 24 Sussex Drive. You might not be able to do it. And even if you did, you might regret it. Look, prime ministers have used this since the days of Louis Saint Laurent. It is, I have not been there. I've been near there. I've talked to many people who've been there with various prime ministers, and they say it's the type of escape the PM needs. It is not, although currently it's under a multi-million-dollar renovation, it is not Shangri-La. It is not opulent. It's a very big house, but it's very old and dated. That's probably why they're updating it. But getting rid of it when it's actually a place that you can entertain foreign dignitaries, where business can be done, and where your family can relax and get away from hot, humid Ottawa, maybe not the best idea.
You know what? I'd like to be the realtor who gets that commission check for 24 Sussex. Could you imagine that? Wow. Now, Brian, as it copes with claims of mistreatment of its staff and how its office is being run, Rideau Hall is taking on a former manager from Cirque du Soleil as its new chief of staff and special advisor to Governor General Julie Payette. Tell me more about that.
This is new. I can't remember this sort of thing happening before. Quite often the Governor General has an attaché or a chief of staff who comes from the military. Every Governor General I've covered, from Adrian Clarkson down, has had someone like that alongside them to help them manage the day-to-day. It's someone with managerial experience, someone with protocol experience. Julie Payette is facing an awful lot of accusations, and not for the first time, that she is a difficult person to work for. The fact that these accusations keep coming up time and again says to me this may be more than she's just a demanding boss, as you would expect an astronaut who needs perfection to get back safely from space. Might be more than that. So they brought in this woman named Brigitte Carbonneau. She used to help run Cirque du Soleil. That's a massive operation in its own right, much bigger than the Governor General's office, and perhaps someone that can try and navigate things and smooth things over. Several former employees coming forward and telling various media outlets that it's a toxic work environment at Rideau Hall. And as I said, it's not the first time. Julie Payette was asked about this in a year-end interview a while back with Lisa LaFlamme, and she said, "Oh, well, I've learned from it." Well, that clip keeps playing on TV right now. Apparently she hasn't.
Political journalist Brian Lilly joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
Children today are constantly using digital devices, gaming systems, computers, and cell phones. Unfortunately, this does bring with it the risk of encountering online predators. How much responsibility for their safety should we be carrying as parents and adults? To talk more about it is Charlene Dokebauer, founder of Internet Sense First and author of The Internet, Are Children in Charge? Charlene, welcome back to BCN.
Well, thank you for having me, Hal. It's great to be here.
Charlene, share a little bit about your group and how it all began for you.
The charity Internet Sense First started because we had a family member affected by the crime of child pornography at the age of 4 by neighbors. And yes, I say neighbors. We can't trust anyone anymore, it seems. And eventually, she lived her life independently, got into drugs and alcohol, and then was killed by a drunk driver when she was 22. And as a network administrator, I discovered child pornography. I don't talk about the employer because I did a lot of freelancing as well. And you don't know that garbage until you see it. And once that happened, I decided to start a charity in memory of my family member and in support of all children online.
And you do some public speaking and teaching on this, and you have some teaching materials for parents as well?
Mainly my book is probably the best resource for parents because it's very comprehensive. I do speaking. I've spoken in Iceland, Europe, India, the United States, Canada, and I go where I'm asked. And I believe that everyone needs to know about my theory of digital supervision.
Charlene, how many parents actually monitor their kids' online activities? Do we actually know what they're watching, or are we dropping the ball sometimes?
Most parents are dropping the ball all the time, I have to say, because the vulnerabilities of our children are huge now. They can be on any platform, and predators know exactly where they are. That's where they go, where their prey is. And the other big problem is that children are becoming the victimizers because of what they're seeing online. There's an epidemic of child-on-child sexual assault that I can get into in a few minutes and in a little more detail.
But getting back to the predators for just a moment here, Charlene, are a lot of, let's say, adults posing as maybe 13 or 14-year-old boys or girls online?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. 9, 10-year-old children, they can even get machines that will disguise their voice as a young child, which makes it so difficult for our children.
I hear many parents say simply, you know what, I can't keep up. My kids know a lot more about technology than I do. So if that's the case, what do you say to those parents? How do you encourage them?
Well, I encourage them to realize that I'm not pointing my finger at parents that they're not doing a good job. I'm saying that traditional parenting is still necessary, but we need to digitize our parenting. We're very busy taking our children to school, hockey games, basketball, dance classes, and then we give them the key to our router. And these children are the most independent of any generation in the history of the world. And we have to start supervising them while they're on digital devices. And my theory of digital supervision, I've written to be very user-friendly so that parents are not intimidated. We just had a summit in London, and it's called the International Summit to End Internet Child Exploitation. It was very well attended. We had people from Africa, Spain, Colombia, all over the place. One father bought my book, and he said, I can't tell you the relief I have in practicing digital supervision. I actually have a handle on what my children are doing. And I also want 6 more books. And I said, why? You want to read it 7 times? And he said, no, I want it for the parents of my children's friends so that they will be practicing digital supervision as well.
You know, Charlene, parents can't be everywhere all the time, and it's hard to keep track of what our kids are watching. Perhaps parents need to be a little more intentional. Do we need to really map out a plan, that digital plan that you were discussing?
Absolutely. One thing I mentioned in my book is that parents should draw up a contract of use with their children. And I say with them. You sit at the table together with them and say, this is the cell phone. We're docking it at 7 o'clock at night. You can pick it up at 7 o'clock in the morning. We will be going through your cell phone, looking at pictures, because the epidemic of nudes for these children is huge. They're taking pictures of themselves nude, sending them, and even though it's their body, they're producing and distributing child pornography, which then the parents own, because essentially the parents own the cell phone. And when I talk to parents about that, they say, you mean we're responsible? Yes, you are, for a minor's activities, but they cannot own a cell phone until they're 18. So therefore, it is your plan, your phone, your iPad.
Is that considered sexting then, when a lot of these kids are taking pictures of their private parts or nude photos and sending them to each other? Is that what they call
That's
sexting?
sexting. Yes, it is, Hal. And it's epidemic. I've talked to so many principals. Every time I speak in a school, a principal will whisper and say, we've had a child charged for this. And I say, no need to worry about it. It's in every school. It's in Canada, the United States, England, New Zealand. It's everywhere. And if people would start practicing digital supervision, which is user-friendly, they would know what their children are doing.
How about if we took that router and kept it in the parent's bedroom and maybe continually changed the password each day?
I advise everyone to put the router in the parental bedroom for 2 reasons. Number one, you can turn it off at night. Someone complained about what about the electronics in the bedroom, and I say it's not going to bother you if it's turned off. And the other reason, you can turn it off, your kids can't turn it on if it's in your bedroom. But the second reason is you're telling your children you're in charge. The location of the router in a common area is not a good idea. If we're paying for it, our children need to know.
I have some parents that tell me, you know what, when you're finished your homework, then I'm going to give you access to the new password for Wi-Fi. And a lot of times the kids do their homework is that they keep changing and updating it each and every day. Now, Charlene, should we also invest in some software to block pornography sites in our homes?
There are 2 ways of looking at that. You can get software to block pornography, and that will wear off when the child's about 8 or 9. They can work around software very easily. For as part of digital supervision, I tell parents to make sure they have a filter between their router and the computer, the host computer. And the router can divide the internet. There's one company that calls it a bright web, so that the child will go up into the bright web and be able to go on the internet without going on sites like that. The unfortunate thing is that does not work when the child is on a cell phone or they're gaming. Gaming can cause a few more issues so that the child cannot be as easily monitored. So parents need to be aware of that and realize that humanity has to supervise humanity. We need to be around the devices. We need to review browser history. And when children realize their parents are reviewing the browser history, as a former educator, I know they'll erase it and put up the science project and the research on history. We need to start looking at the actual history, looking at what they're doing. If a child turns off a monitor as soon as you go into a room, you go in and turn it back on. You don't let them off with that. Who is in charge? Right now, our children are in charge of the internet too often. We need to take charge and take our children back and be able to talk to them and supervise them.
I love that, absolutely. Now, what do we need to teach our kids specifically when it comes to online safety? Avoid chat rooms, for one?
Avoid chatting, avoid sending anything like a picture without the geolocator being turned off, things like that. And what I tell everyone now is that our children in many ways are being given too much ownership for decisions online. For example, a child knowing at the age of 8 whom they should speak with online is asking an awful lot of an 8-year-old. I don't know of an 8-year-old that plans dinner, let alone who they're going to talk to online. It's a tough call, and parents need to be talking to their children a lot about that. They need to be online games to see how their children are communicating online. Is your child a bully or a victim or a victimizer? Are they bullying a child into sending a nude, which is happening too much? Do you know if your child is going to commit suicide? They communicate all this online. If you're not online supporting your children and supervising, we are lacking in our parenting skills. We need to digitize.
You know what's really scary as well at the same time, Charlene, is how much information kids share with strangers as opposed to their own parents who love and care for them. Do parents need to set a firm limit on how much time kids spend on their digital devices? You mentioned something about 7 o'clock, give me your phone until maybe 7 o'clock the next morning, and as well, maybe social media sites?
Yes, now that can be difficult because even when I'm at a business meeting, I'll ask everyone to put their phones away because it's intimidating when someone's looking at a phone and you're a speaker. Try telling a child you're taking away their cell phone, which is why a contract before they even get a cell phone is so important. They're on digital devices too much. Yes, there should be limitations. And it's kind of funny, Hal, at this point that people will tell them you're only going to watch TV tonight. You can't go on the iPad. And I just sort of, that's punishment, is going on television rather than being online. There's just so much in my book about this, taking away a cell phone, what you need to look out for, what you need to look out for with a child that might be groomed by a predator. There's so much in digital supervision, but you know what, Hal? We can all do it, and we have to do it.
Charlene, is it too harsh saying kids should not have cell phones until maybe the age of 14 or 15, or waiting to have an Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or Facebook account until they're about the same age?
It's not out of the question, but I think my words would be good luck because so many children have them. It's again, if parents are giving the cell phones, tell your children you're going to be checking everything on that cell phone. And I mean everything. You press on every icon. They will create an icon for their nudes that looks as though it's a calculator or just a beach somewhere. Do children lie? Of course they do. I've been a teacher at parent-teacher night, and parents will say, my children never lie to me. And I would look at them and say, well, I lied to my parents. In fact, my poor sainted mother, I probably still tell the odd lie. We do. We want approval from our parents. We want to get off with things that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And this is where digital supervision comes in. Don't let them lie to you about the internet. Supervise. And you mentioned TikTok. TikTok is a very scary environment because kids are doing live streaming of nudes, of dancing and things like that. And I hesitate to mention one environment because this can happen anywhere. We have Facebook, we have FaceTime, we have live streaming everywhere. And predators love to get the live streaming. They are recording it as a child is doing it, but the child thinks it's being erased. And then the predator will sell it. And then when the child might find out who's looking at my pictures today, it's just a never-ending story.
Yeah, it's a dark world we're living in right now. Now, part of the challenge is that your kids will have access to their computers and their phones during school hours, and you're at work. How do you manage that?
Well, for one thing, I advise everyone on a cell phone especially to put a keylogger on. And a keylogger will record every key that a child presses on the cell phone, as well a comprehensive one will record all the pictures. And a parent can put that on before the child even gets the phone, and every night they can have a report sent to them so that they will know exactly what the child is involved in. You can put a type of filter on cell phones. Again, the kids can get around them. They talk about this in school all the time. We get around all that. But the keylogger is a pretty good source. Looking at it is another one. I had one parent actually take her router to work every day.
Wow.
Which, because she had an extreme problem with her child.
Wow.
And it's difficult.
But you know, if the child has a data plan, who needs the router? How many parents actually take the time to sit down with their kids and have a really good heart-to-heart talk about internet safety and the potential consequences?
Very few. I've talked to people just casually about digital supervision. And one fellow said, well, I talked to my 14-year-old son last night and he told me he didn't do anything and I'm good with that. And I'm like, really? Your child is lying. There's no question. The kids are all involved in this stuff. And I looked at him, I thought, no, I don't think I need to go any further. He was just blocking it. He should be looking at the devices every day at random. Take a look. See what your kids are doing. See what pictures are on their galleries. I've interviewed kids in high school that said there are thousands of these nudes on on galleries. Are parents looking? They couldn't be because the parents can be charged for possession of child pornography. And we had an incident in London, Ontario. A 9-year-old was sending videos over TikTok to a 35-year-old. And the FBI tipped off the police. And this is a scenario most parents would not want to have. The police came knocking at their door at 6:45, opened the door, confiscated all computer equipment, the parents and the child's, because the parents are suspect. Are they allowing this? Because there are some parents allowing this and selling these videos for their income. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you want to have that conversation with the police? And that's not just parents, grandparents. Are kids visiting you with your wide open networks? Are you looking at what they're doing while they're in your home? A child visiting another kid, what are they doing?
Yeah, that's incredible. Charlene Doka-Bauer, founder of Internet Sense First, thanks a lot for joining me today from Ontario.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you so much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.